Hello, I'm Michael Pearson. This is The Human Condition. Our topic today is how to get ahead of chronic illness and illnesses. Most people that have talked to us about this issue have more than one chronic illness, and many Americans have more than one chronic illness. And a number of Americans, between 8 and 12%, are only 8 and 12% are metabolically healthy by blood test measurements and measurements of weight and body fat and other types of girth measurements and other types of biometrics. So we really need to fix this as a country. This wasn't always the case when I was a younger person. America was quite healthy, and we have let ourselves go. So what we'd like to talk about today is how to get ahead of chronic illness. What are the reasons why we have the most chronic illness of any country in the world? Even though we seem to have figured out acute illness, we know how to deal with trauma, we know how to deal with acute infection, we know how to deal with all kinds of stuff. We don't seem to have great understanding of chronic illnesses, and we need to look at their mechanisms, because the really great secret about chronic illness is they all have the same foundations in physiology. Even though they may be widely different, like chronic depression versus chronic heart disease, the root causes of all of those conditions that seem very, very spread out are very much shared. And we have been brainwashed into believing that they're not, and that you need a pill for every ill and a potion for every emotion. And I just don't believe that. So, how to get ahead of these chronic illnesses? The most important thing about getting at the root cause of chronic illness is to understand at first the philosophy of chronic care versus acute care, urgency, and fear. The medical industrial complex has made it a real expert level of them being able to convince people that chronic illnesses are dangerous and that they must intervene immediately or the person will get sick and die quickly. If you don't do medical interventions right away, if you don't do the expensive and invasive and dangerous and toxic interventions of modern medicine, and I don't mean just, all doctors, I mean interventions that involve patented medicines, toxic drugs with side effects, implanted medical devices, surgeries, things that are not necessarily necessary, things that are not urgent, and things that could wait. One of the most important things we want to ask our doctors is, can this wait? What if I do nothing right now? What will happen? How long have I got? Can I buy myself some more time to educate myself and figure out what the actual root causes of what's happening to me? Or should I just go get a cataract surgery? Should I just go get a spine surgery? Should I just go have surgery for my kidneys, my uterus, my heart, my liver, my feet, my ankles? Should I get a joint replacement therapy? Do I need a second knee replacement? Do I need a shoulder replacement? All of these chronic illnesses have people and doctors and systems who have reversed them. And this really flies in the face of a lot of what we know as common knowledge, because we trust our doctors and we go to them and they tell us, how these things work. And they just say, well, your joint is worn out and those tissues don't grow back. Well, you know what? We're finding out that really isn't true. We're finding out that most organs regenerate, that cartilage regenerates, bone regenerates, vascular tissue regenerates. To some degree, hearts regenerate. The brain certainly regenerates. Now, there's certain problems with brain regeneration at the neuron level, but when you look at astrocytes, there's tremendous amounts of brain regeneration. And even in adulthood. Do we make our own stem cells? Yes, they've just made recent discoveries of stem cells in menstrual blood. There are stem cells that are triggered by fasting. Fasting is free, guys. So there's a lot we can do, and there's a lot of things we can help ourselves with by not giving in to the idea that if you've got a symptom or you've got a problem, you need a drug now. And really, that's just because they want you on the drug before you figure it out, and you don't realize that you can take care of these things yourself. If you have a problem, it usually involves a little bit of work to learn what's going on, and then secondarily, a little bit more work to do it. But that's really what's important. If you've got a priority, I was just talking to some friends and family about this. If you've got a priority, if you've got a reason that you're doing something, like, you're part of you're part of an art restoration project and you want to go restore some painting somewhere, or you want to restore some sculpture, or you've got an opportunity to see a certain set of patients in some rare situation. That's fine. Do that. Temporary reasons. I can't tell you how many chronic patients come to me and say, I just got to get through this. My son's going to graduate in 9 months from high school, and then I can really, dive into taking care of myself. But it's a real crisis because the kid is not doing well. And I'll say, look, let's just get you through this. Let's enter what we call a coping phase, and let's do a coping phase of care where we're not treating the root causes. We're just helping you cope without drugs, and sometimes with drugs. Sometimes it's with drugs. But I mean, I can't tell you all how terribly awful the Ozempic phenomenon, the GLP-1 class of drugs are, the incredible muscle wasting which happens to people. This is called sarcopenia, and it happens in cancer, where a person will preferentially lose muscle and less fat. And yet they lose weight and they look better because they can fit into their clothes better, but they end up with Ozempic face. They get temporal wasting and they get a skeletal-like face because they lose muscle preferentially to fat. And if you do it right, you lose fat and not muscle when you're losing weight naturally. And when you're using ketogenic diets, carnivore diets, other types of diets, fasting, there's all kinds of things that can be done safely that does not involve the muscle wasting and the Ozempic face of what happens with the GLP-1 inhibitor class of drugs. And it's not just Ozempic, there's other drugs that fit that category. I avoid them like the plague. There are certainly uses for, almost every drug has a use. And usually it's a trade-off for something else that's much more lethal. Now, being fat isn't lethal today. It's a problem and it can be addressed without heroic interventions. So if a person really wants to take care of their overweight problem, they need to look at the fact that weight gain, overweight, and insulin resistance and inflammation are a big part of most chronic illnesses. The root causes of most chronic illnesses are inflammation, oxidative stress, which are not exactly the same thing, but very similar, weight gain and obesity, and of course, insulin resistance with or without weight gain. And the most common feature of that is probably what we would call visceral adiposity. That would be fat right around here, which is at the pancreas and the liver, where a person has visceral fat. And visceral fat is extremely dangerous hormonally and relating to cancers, because when a person is skinny fat, where they don't look fat, but they've got a fatty liver, they are more prone to sleep disorders, cancers, inflammatory disorders, cardiovascular disease, brain issues, things like strokes and dementias and brain degeneration, and of course autoimmune diseases. So all of those things happen with those things. So no matter whether it's a mental illness or a physical illness, whether it's joint problems or inflammation, whether it's arthritis, whether it's heart disease, whether your problem is a sleep disorder, all of them are related to the same steps and the same failures that we make as humans to understand what we really need. And whether you've got a particular genetic tendency toward one thing or another is not as important. Usually, all of the genetic inheritances that we all get, and this is a big distraction that people get lost in chronic illnesses, they go and get their SNPs done. And they say, oh, I've got this SNP and I've got that SNP, and it makes me really unique and special. And yes, you are unique and special, but that's not how you want to be unique and special. So don't make your specialness be your disease. Don't make your specialness be your diagnosis. Don't make what makes you special be your SNPs. That's not what makes you special. What makes you special is who you are and all the unique features that you have that you can give to the world and that make you unique and different, but not ill. If you want to cling to those things, you can, but you're not going to get well. So I would give it up. When patients cling to their genetic SNPs and their genetic illnesses, and they say their genetic tendencies, because it's not an illness, it's a tendency. A gene is a tendency toward activation of protein and activation of genes and activations of enzymes. It's not a death sentence, and it's not for sure thing, because genes and SNPs and enzyme activity can be turned up and turned down by the environment. That's called epigenetics. Don't ever forget it. So you might ask, well, what happened in the past when people had these genes? Well, most of those genes were not expressed because people had a high level of activity. They had a high level of exercise. They had a high level of natural light. They didn't have the artificial blue light of screens and light bulbs. They did not have processed foods and chemicals. They did not have pesticides, herbicides. They did not have a lot of carbohydrates. And they had plenty of high quality proteins, minerals in the food, and saturated fat. That's just the fact of people around the world. There were no majorly successful vegan cultures. I'm sorry, there just wasn't. So you can still do it if you're super committed to veganism, but I would put that person on a keto vegan type of diet if I had the choice, or if I was on their doctor team. If they're dealing with these chronic illnesses that we're looking at, mental health and physical health. The hormone dysregulation is one of the big factors that happen during these episodes. Almost everybody that has a problem that's chronic has some kind of hormone dysregulation. That might be sleep hormones, that might be satiety hormones, hormones of satisfaction and fullness for eating. It might be insulin and glucagon and insulin resistance. It might well be the sex hormones, testosterone and estrogens, all the three estrogens in us. Both males and females have different kinds of estrogens, at least 3 types. There are progesterone molecules as well as androstenedione and other androgens. Both men and women have androgens, and they need to balance those androgens. Things like 5-dihydroxytestosterone, 5-DHT, things like androstenedione, things like DHEA sulfide. These are precursor hormones to both sex hormones and adrenal hormones. And so the adrenal hormones would be things that affect not just our stress level, but that affect our ability to retain water. So we're looking at things like cortisol and epinephrine and things like aldosterone. These are things that help us preserve water and not urinate ourselves to death. So all of those balances can affect sleep hormones like orexin in your brain, things like leptin and ghrelin, which regulate your appetites and your satiety. And there's many, many others. So a common theme of hormone dysregulation is something that medicine tends to try to take away from you. And it tends to say, well, Mrs. Jones, this is a hormone problem and it's too serious. You need an endocrinologist and you need hormone replacement because you can't make this hormone yourself. Well, I beg to differ. You might be able to make that hormone yourself, and you might be able to either make it yourself or get a bioidentical hormone replacement if it's really, really bad and you have not been able to manufacture your own. But you don't know if you can manufacture your own if you've never measured your toxins and detoxified. You don't know if you've never done a low carb diet or tried fasting. You don't know if you've never measured your body for skinny fat, visceral fat. And the way to do that is an ultrasound of the abdomen. It's $100. Or get a more expensive MRI of your abdomen or CT scan, and you can see if there's visceral fat. With today's ultrasound machines, you can really get a good picture of that and know if you've got visceral fat. There's no accurate blood test for visceral fat, although I will say that people often have elevated triglycerides and cholesterol and LDL, but that's not a measurement of visceral fat. It's not an actual measurement. You must measure with imaging. You cannot use a blood test to confirm or deny non-alcoholic fatty liver disease or even liver fibrosis. You have to have imaging, and that's usually ultrasound or MRI. So another chronic hallmark of these illnesses is cardiovascular illness. This is where people get ischemia and restriction of blood vessels in their brain or in their heart or in their bodies. They can get in their sex organs and have lowered sex drive. They can get sexual dysfunction. They can get cold hands and feet. They can get all kinds of problems with large and small blood vessels. And really what you need to know is that there are 2 kinds of plaque. There's soft plaques and there's hard plaques. And there's different imaging that cardiologists use to try to find this. And so you want to talk with your health advisors on, things that are a little bit more invasive if you've got a family history or you're concerned. Things like, a CT scan of the heart, which is a calcium score. There's also, types of tests where cardiologists can run devices up into your blood vessels and scan your heart with an internal scan. They can do various ultrasound or other types of scans inside the heart to look at soft versus hard plaques to figure out if you're one of those people. Because there are people that are not overweight that suddenly drop dead, and that's their first symptom is death. They don't have a symptom. They don't have a warning system. They're just maybe healthy athletes. They're low body weight. They're lean and skinny. They got good measurements and good statistics. They've got good body fat, and yet they have heart disease or vascular disease. There are other people that have chronic brain problems where they've got vascular disorders in their brains and they've got myeloid plaquing and amyloid plaquing rather, and they've got tau proteins and other stuff that is a buildup of oxidative stress usually, and that can be reversed. So we have to talk about the reversal of this. We have to talk about the idea that you can reclaim your health, whether you have these serious illnesses or not. And usually what happens is you go to the doctor and they take away your power and they tell you, you can't fix this yourself. You can't do it, or it's impossible, or we don't know how to do it, or it's too hard. And I want to tell you, both of those are wrong. It's not too hard, and we do know how to do it, and there are people doing it. And you've got to consider the different ways of changing the diet, dealing with oxidative stress, dealing with blue light, dealing with chemical toxins that are in our environment that weren't there 100 years ago. And then lastly, autoimmune diseases. I think autoimmune diseases and cancers are extremely important because if we don't talk about the fact that there are mounting evidences that have been suppressed. John Ioannidis was a very famous doctor who wrote about this phenomenon, that much of our medical literature has been corrupted by special interests, which means that the fact that we don't see a lot of people who have recovered and reversed cancer and reversed autoimmune disease and reversed arthritis and reversed diabetes and reversed kidney disease and reversed Alzheimer's and reversed Parkinson's disease and reversed all these different problems is because the journals are captured. They have been captured for a long time, and much of what is published is secretly published by industry, and there are doctors that have ghostwritten for them. And this is a corrupt industry, and it is largely not reproducible, and a lot of it serves the industry. So now that we know this in the last few years, really since COVID, it really emerged since right before COVID, it started to come out that there are incredible abilities for us to reverse disease. There are incredible capacities for us, even down to the fact that infectious disease may not be what we think it is. I'm not telling you that people can't get sick from contagion. I'm just saying that contagion and contagious disease and infectious disease may not be all it's cracked up to be. There's so much that we can do. And there is so much that individual practitioners and small groups of people like the Low Carb Down Under group have done to show that there's a lot that can be done. The CrossFit people have published lots of work. Dr. Jack Cruz and his light stories about the mechanisms of light, all of the different low carb down under, the ketogenic, the carnivore people. There's a huge movement that is showing the reversal of disease. And I have been at the center of it for 30 years. And I've seen incredible reversals. And I wish that I could share with you all of them, but we're working on how to do that in the future. And we hope to bring you a lot of that in our grand rounds. We hope to bring it to you in actual documentary stories, and we hope to bring it to you in many, many ways so that you can see the people, the doctors, the patients, the families, and how they recovered. And the stories are real tearjerkers. So realize that there are ways to get out of this. And if you haven't found somebody, there is no single disease or disorder that somebody hasn't cured. And so if you've got a problem, reach out and start trying to find who has solved this, and get around the propaganda that is out there in the U.S. Public Health Service. That is our message for this session. Thank you.